everyone. I'm Ilja van Eck. I'll do a proper intro later. I want to start with a quick story because a couple of weeks, months, time's been going really fast. At least earlier this year, I was vibe coding a little tool, and it was for easings in our platform. We'll get to what the platform actually is, but we wanted to make an internal tool to make the usage and generation and exploration of easings for your animations a bit easier. But I have absolutely zero clue how to do SVG magic and how to handle everything that comes with this in terms of mathematics. So I was using Claude, obviously, and I was making a very ugly looking SVG because the focus, of course, was on functionality and not very much on looks. I think the contrast is a bit messed up, but okay, we'll manage. But when I was making the tool, I got to the point where, okay, I've got the SVG curve editor working, but we need a way to preview how this curve treats itself when it's being animated, right? And so the very typical thing that you'll see is an animated box on most of the tools. This was also the suggestion that Claude gave us. I'm sorry for the folks in the back that can't see the bottom of the screen, but there's just a rectangle moving left to right to show you how the easing behavior of this thing is. But something didn't really click because nobody is animating these boxes on a website, right? We're making real UI, not these stupid boxes, but it is what you would expect when you go to different easing tool. Many of these just have these quick previews, but we wanted something different. So I ended up making these, it is playing, yeah, these contextual preview animations over here of actual UI elements, like a button where you can quickly test some easings, or how a modal would appear, or maybe how a slider will behave if you change the easing between something more bouncy and something more clean. Talking too fast. And then an FAQ drawer as well. So all of these contextual animations that you are very likely to be wanting to animate, and that is how you want to experience this different easing over here, because nobody animates a box. And that decision was the thing that Claude could not tell me, and that is sort of going to be the red line in today's story. It's okay. My name is Ilja van Eck. I'm from the Netherlands. I live in Belgium now, and I'm building Osmo Supply together with this guy, who you may know as the man with no mercy for copycats, Dennis, and he's also from the Netherlands. Together we tend to focus on on websites that tend to win these nice red certificates, little flags. And earlier last year we decided to make this platform called Osmo Supply, because it actually originated from this thing that we were doing for our own projects, where you're constantly redoing every single thing, building it from scratch, and you're like, oh, how did I do it last time? So you have to go to the other project, rip out everything that was custom, and try to make it for the new project. And this is really annoying. So we decided, okay, let's make a platform where we can pre-made these structures for ourselves and just open it up to the public, because our work also tends to get copied. So why not make it easy and make a living out of it? But I started with this story because that thing with the box was sort of the textbook solution. And that is the thing that AI tends to give us for everything that we do, right? And the gap between what you want and what the textbook solution is, that is the thing that I want to talk about right now. But it's not something new. This is a concept that's been going on for a lot longer, because every time these tools tend to get better, and in the scarcity of certain skills, they move upstreams. This will make more sense in a second. The thing that I want to first start with is sort of the history in terms of making websites and some eras that we went through. It's 5 in total. And I think everything started a bit with knowing how. So knowing how to make websites in general, and the markup, getting something on the internet, that was a scarce skill at the beginning. No longer. Things moved to knowing where. So CMSs showed up, and things started to move into a scarce skill being knowing what information architecture to pick, what CMS. Then things started moving into knowing what. So themes and templates showed up, and the scarce skill was curating and finding a good one online. Knowing how to assemble. I actually hate that I couldn't find a word that was one word, because it looks out of place. But with the rise of no-code and low barrier entry, the thing that really started to pop up was design and dev fluency. And now I think we're entering an era that is more about knowing whether or not to use something, whether or not to put something, whether or not to trust Claude with its solution that it provides, and whether to put that on your website. Wenson Wu, he's an engineer and a researcher at Berkeley. He put this really cleanly, I think, with the statement of every drop in the cost of execution is a corresponding increase in the demand for taste. If we think for a second, across all of these 5 eras, there was one thing that was in common, and that was the scarce skill of knowing what to pick, and the ability to decide whether the work was right. And this is not something new, right? We saw that the skill was always there, but it was sort of buried under this burden and layer of execution because we were too busy and caught up into the work to really worry about that. We were just worried about getting something online in general and really not worrying about that as the main thing. So there was this fog of execution, and Wenson describes this in his article that for most of human history, execution was so expensive that it obscured what actually mattered. If we think about monks in the 1400s, when they were scripting a manifest, they wouldn't care about whether it was worth reading because they were about to spend 6 months lettering this single manuscript. In the 1860s or whatever, not specifically the 60s, which is when portrait painting was a thing, painters didn't care who they were supposed to paint. It was paying rent, so you pay it and you're executing. It's called the Jevons paradox. When in the 1860s, that's why I had the number in my head, when in England coal became super cheap, you'd expect that maybe people would start to use less coal because it was cheaper. But actually, because it was efficient, all of these new needs and things that popped up that coal could be used for and was cheap. And the thing is that these constraints, they mask the latent demand that was always there. I'm speaking super fast. So when things move upstream, right, and things become more efficient, it actually unveils these new needs for them. And it does not eliminate the need of human judgment because it always also has created new professions. And the thing what I mean with this taste layer, the title of this talk, is not necessarily what it might suggest in terms of visual taste. This has to do a lot more on a conceptual level. Maybe we'll have a new meaning of CTO, which will be Chief Taste Officer, sometime soon. Now, but Paul Graham, the founder of the famous startup accelerator Y Combinator and founder of Hacker News, among other things, he states in an article in 2002, if taste is just personal preference, then everyone's is already perfect. You know, if taste is just a thing that you can say, oh, it's just my taste, and we know that this is not true. You know, if you push back on the subjective aspect of it, no one could ever be wrong, and no one could also get better on it. So all of us over the years, we have improved, and we know that this is not true. If I look at the work I did a couple of years ago, I cringe like shit, and I know that many of you guys do as well. So there must be something more to this than just preference. And I like to pull a parallel with the sense of architecture. Because Peter Zumthor, who's a Swiss architect, he wrote a small book in 2006, and on the intro page, he writes that whenever he enters a building, there's just this feeling that comes over him. Before he analyzes any of the lighting, of the shape, and the materials that he uses, it's just this feeling that you have when you enter a building. And it's the same feeling that we also know when opening up a website, right? Sometimes you just open up a nice website and you have no clue what you're looking at. It just looks good and it feels nice, like someone cared about making this website. It does something to you before your mind catches up. So it's not something random. It is often it's many small decisions about whether each piece belongs. So it's a very long chain of things getting you to a certain point. And John McPhee, one of the greatest non-fiction writers of the last century, he distills the act of writing down to these words. Writing is selection. He says to even start writing, you have to pick one word from a million options in English. Every single word that you put in the paper afterwards is another piece of selection. And this concept is that everything that we have to do is selective. Every component that we put on the side, every section, every line of copy, every animation, and so on, everything that you do is a matter of selection. So there's also taste. So taste is more than just visually, oh, this is a nice color, you know? And so that begs the question that selection is a question. Does this belong here? That question is everything else, you know, everything else can be borrowed and generated these days. I have a component platform. You can take stuff, which is also kind of selection. But that taste layer, that is what I want to get back to. But the thing that I started this talk about, you know, about the box moving left to right. And textbook thing, this was right. The AI just compared this to a lot of its training data, and overall the easing previews that you see in all these tools is just a box moving left to right. Funnily enough, actually in the final concept, we did keep a box moving up and down, but the main thing this here, I guess this was a piece of selection as well. Does this box moving left to right belong here, or can we do better? So we were solving a problem that no one had because no one moves that box. So the model has no deep understanding of who you're working something for, what these people want to achieve, and what it is that you want to achieve. The AI is trained to give an average answer to the average version of a problem. They know you know something for what you want to achieve, like I said, but The AI doesn't, and that's a gap. And you can give it a lot of context, but we all tend to know this sentence of "you're absolutely right," and then if you say the exact opposite thing, it's like, "Oh no, you are right. It's this." So it's very agreeable, and it makes it extremely difficult to get a good sense of judgment from this model that is just trained to give you a textual answer. So that brings up the question of how do we work through this? There is no single right way, and I'm not going to pretend that I have a golden formula for anything. Some people like to work through this using a library like Reloom to skip the initial setup and get the wireframe section set up super quickly. Some other people like to bring in Osmo at the end and bring in more advanced components of things that they would otherwise have to spend a day prompting for themselves, and they can just get it from a platform. Other people like to build everything from scratch, just out of principle, and maybe the friction of making something from scratch brings up new ideas. And many people, including myself, we do a mix of all of these things. So there is infinite combinations and ways that you can work around this. Also, given the fact that cloud literally changes every single day. I mean, always when I saw the cloud updates on Twitter, there was always some guy, you just knew that, okay, someone's going to comment this, I can give it a like, because it does feel that way. But I think that's fine. It's kind of the point as well. So it's all right. But the thing that all of these options have in common is leverage. They give us leverage to do something faster, something quicker. That's the same. Something more complex, They give us more capabilities and options, but it's not that thing underneath, the taste layer. Leverage just changes how fast you arrive at the moment where you have to decide whether what you're making is any good. See someone taking a photo, so wait for you. And I feel like if that part is not part of the main work, then what is? So I guess we can get into 3 layers. The first one being execution. Are you capable of building something well? Markup, accessibility, performance, this is stuff that AI excels at. This is, I'd argue, all of these models are much better at than me. So it's great to leverage this to get to the next point faster, which would be assembly. Does these things fit nicely together? Do you have a good design system? Is there a good flow and rhythm on your website? And that brings you to the final layer of taste. And that taste is deciding, should this exist like this, here, and why? If we have a look at that, the first 2 is the things that are currently, I'd say, executed better than many of us can do ourselves by AI and much faster. So that thing bringing us to that final step of taste actually brings us a lot more freedom and time to work on the things that I think most of us enjoy, and not the mundane job of setting up the project every single time. You could technically argue that many of us are moving more into an art director or technical director position over our own LLMs. And I feel like when working, there is 3 questions that we could keep at the center of all of this. And that is, what is this for? Who uses this? And why do they need it? Should this exist at all? We need to answer this in natural language, because if you can't answer the thing that you're doing in a natural language, it might not be any good. It might look good, but things are going to drift and you kind of lose the plot. What can I cut? Most iterations add something, but there is discipline in removing. There's Robert Gottlieb, who is a US writer and editor. He cut 300,000 words when editing the book Power Broker, and the book still won a Pulitzer Prize. So he demonstrated that there was art in removing stuff from it. The book did end up, I think, having 1,300 pages in general. It's a massive book, but still. And for this practical example that I was showing earlier, I really don't know how to contrast this, but we have a collection of Osmo favorites. And me and Dennis, we were making it, and it was like, oh, yeah, we have this tool and this one, this one. We had a massive list of easings that we wanted to include as presets, 10 different bounces and different out eases. But for us, indeed, the art was also in cutting that down into 12 selected favorites and then give everybody else the freedom to make their own thing instead of offering everything up front. And since this is the Webflow room, figured it would be a nice moment to insert that the whole platform and thing is all built in Webflow. So both the marketing side and the dashboard and the whole tool. And what started as a super ugly MVP, I did think that through from the beginning of making sure that all of the functional pieces would work with data attributes, so that I could later on rebuild the entire scratch from in Webflow the way I wanted it, with the elements that I wanted. Just give everything the data attributes that were used in code. And then it was actually fairly simple to set this up. Of course, there was always fine-tuning and tweaking, but good approach from the beginning. And that gave us this tool over here. And I think the JavaScript for the tool itself was about 2,000 lines in total. And as you can see, there is just a fully editable graph that you can take. And we did keep the box as a sort of a quick preview thing. Because like when you're quickly making new eases, or maybe you're adjusting the one, you don't want to be scrolling down to those contextual previews. You just quickly want to get a sense of how this affects the movement of the thing that you're doing, rather than having to scroll down, because sometimes it is still useful. And fun fact is that for all of the things that we do at Osmo, is that the entire code base is about 16,000 lines, I think even more, to power everything from the marketing side to the product. And so quite a hefty project. And brings me back to the question list over here. And the third one is, what is mine in this? Why did I choose this instead of accepting the default? And what is the thing that is only from me? And if you have the answer of nothing, I don't think it's bad, but it is something worth thinking about and worth noticing, that if you're only doing work where there's nothing of you, I feel like it's a missed opportunity. And online, there is very much so two extremes, I feel like, especially on Twitter and on LinkedIn. It is either the fearmongers, with the age-old thing of like, oh, all the jobs are going to be obsolete. And I hate those people. And then on the other hand, there is the extremely loud optimists who, there's the most exciting era in tech of everything, and everything is possible. And I feel like most of us are somewhere in the middle to the right side. I hope at least, because it makes a lot of things a lot more fun instead of being the depressed one on the left. But it is overwhelming right now, and keeping up with all these new launches and tools and everything. But there is no, when you're in the middle, I don't think there should be any panic. But there's also not this utopia where anything is possible. But like I said, it's a good thing. I feel like people who will do well are the people that will actually lean into the part that they can't do, instead of being afraid of the things that they can now do. Just embracing, okay, I have these new powers. Like I said, like I know I'm shit at math, so I couldn't have done all of the SVG magic and all of the things required for this tool. But it did allow me to make this what I think is a nice tool, and I've heard from some other people that it's fun to use as well. Tools are taking over the execution and assembly part of work, so not the third layer of taste. But it frees up more time to think for ourselves, right? People picking up disciplines that we never had the bandwidth for. For example, also at Osmo, I knew nothing of APIs in general. I was just a very straightforward front-end dev. I knew nothing of all these things. But now I'm building internal tools to record screen recordings. We have our own tool internally where we can push assets into our CDN, and it's all named nicely, and there's good version history. We're making a converter to take our, bless you, HTML resources into React, and then a converter that will take those React things into working framework components. So there's all sorts of things that I would never be able to do, and I wouldn't even think of doing that just because it's way out of my skill set. We'd have to hire somebody, but now it's just me behind my laptop having fun chatting with Cloud all day. It's now one person shipping stuff that usually would take a team weeks, if not months, to make previously. So the floor of the things that are possible is coming up in general. And that taste layer in this thing is yours. It always was. Thank you.